Happy Tuesday. Welcome into DraftKings, the Slate, a weekly program we air just around the 5 o'clock hour Eastern time up until 6 o'clock. We have plenty to get to today. We're going to do two sports today, baseball and football. Steve, your little chirping noises as I try to introduce the program and introduce you and Garion Thorne. Well, I guess that's been done already. It's really not that much appreciated. How are you doing? Let's just get that out of the way. How are you, Steve?
I'll talk when your attitude's better.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there is some news here in the last hour in regards to the baseball game coming up in 5 minutes between the Brewers and the Braves. Astros and White Sox in progress in Chicago. They are through 6, and it's 6-1 Astros. They lead that series 2-1. They try to put that to bed and face the Red Sox in the ALCS. And of course, tonight, the Giants, they have a chance to wrap it up with the Dodgers in the NLDS. 2-1 series lead for San Francisco. They are underway tonight at 9:07 Eastern time. So let's not waste any time and get into Brewers Braves, which is coming your way in a couple of minutes. Gary, and we'll go to you because there are others here that just want to toss pettiness my way and be a distraction, it feels, to the quality of the show. So Gary, and please, your developing thoughts as we get set for first pitch between the Brewers and Braves. What do you got?
I would say the biggest thing for me in this game, especially after the Jorge Soler news, which obviously is he has tested positive for COVID. He has been taken off the Braves NLDS roster. He is not eligible to play tonight. He's been scratched despite the initial lineup that had him batting leadoff. I had already sort of identified Dansby Swanson as maybe an undervalued asset, someone who was probably going to bat 7th or 8th for the Braves, but at the very least had flashed some pretty decent power this season against left-handed pitching. He had a 229 isolated power within the split during the regular season. Suddenly he's batting leadoff, and he is very underpriced for someone who is batting leadoff. So his ownership will reflect his movement in the lineup, but maybe not as much as it would have had he been batting leadoff at 1 o'clock versus batting leadoff at 4 o'clock. So I think Swanson really is the big mover and shaker in the last hour or so in the showdown slate.
Steve, the public loves the under 8.5 runs tonight, and you find the Braves as a favorite for the public, the handle and the money line, north of 56% on the handle, 61% of the bets like Atlanta to wrap this thing up. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when you go through the first 3 games of the series and score a total of 2 runs, hard to like that team, said team. And then they're facing Charlie Morton, who's been phenomenal for the Braves. I mean, I honestly don't really care who the Braves would have thrown out there on the mound. Like it was, it was between Morton or Enoa. Either one, I would have been like, yeah, fine, I'm going to take the Braves in this spot because the Brewers have been that bad offensively. The problem for the Brewers is this has happened quite often for them, but their pitching is so good that it put them in a position to win all of these games. They don't have that luxury when it's a 5-game series and they don't hit anymore. And that's exactly what happened here. And, quite frankly, this is probably a blessing for anybody else that's left in the National League because that is probably the best rotation of the teams remaining. I would say that they have a better rotation than the Giants and the Dodgers. And that's even with Max Scherzer in the mix, who, by the way, is not looking too good at this juncture. So I would say that the Braves knocking off the Brewers really opens up this National League because I know you were going to talk about this later in the show. I had the Brewers going to the World Series because of that rotation, but if you're not hitting, doesn't matter if you're only giving up a couple runs, if you're putting up goose eggs, and that's exactly what's happened in this series. So I think it's curtains for the Braves. For the Brewers in this one. I think the Braves move on to the NLCS.
Wow. Okay. And the Brewers team total tonight at 3.5 runs,
under
over -110, the under at -120. So the under has been juiced in that scenario tonight. So that game is underway in just a couple of minutes. Of course, we will monitor Astros and White Sox. They are in the 7th. Astros lead 6-1. The White Sox had a 1-0 lead. 6 unanswered for the Astros. Anything else? But now, rarely do we do a show like this and there's a game going on while we're doing it. That may have been the case, Steve, for you last Friday with LaMarca and Kaufman, but is there anything that you suggest to people if once the game's underway, anything you want to live bet that in the game, or do you stay away from that in these postseason games?
I mean, at this juncture, the Astros are up 6-1, top of the 7th inning. Unless you're thinking that the Astros bullpen is going to implode, then obviously, money line at 1,600 or plus 4.5 run line might tickle your fancy. But, this late in the juncture, the Astros basically have this game wrapped up. Maybe you can get an over 9.5, which is the live line right now for the game with 7 runs scored. So they need to score 3 more in the next 2.5 innings to hit that. But at this juncture, this game's pretty much over.
Okay. Total going in was at 8.5. And as Steve said, 9.5 live right now. So let's look back at last night. The Red Sox are one team that has punched its ticket to the next round. They're going to the American League Championship Series. They will host, or rather they will play the Astros or the White Sox. Astros, as Steve just said, are in control of this game, which started at 2:00. They stunned the 100-win Rays last night. Garion, you're already annoyed because you think the Red Sox are going to win it, don't you?
Yeah, but that's a perpetual state of fear that I live in, that any Boston sports team will be successful. Again, I love the company I work for. I'm happy DraftKings continues to employ me. But did I have to really come to terms with myself 4 years ago, knowing that I'd have to just interact with thousands of Boston sports fans every single day of my life? I did. And I make that sacrifice for you people every day for the good people who read the content at this, who watch us on YouTube, who read our stuff on DK Playbook. It's a burden I live with, but it's one that I'm happy to do.
Okay, well, elaborate, please. Do you feel so? You are convinced through 4 games how the Red Sox beat that Rays team. You're actually serious. Like, you think that they have a really good shot of winning it. They are the 3rd favorite currently on the DK Sportsbook. Last I checked, it was at plus 380.
Look, they have the offensive pieces to win any game. We talked about on the show, I believe last Tuesday, that whenever there's a game in Fenway Park, you never really know what's going to happen. It is definitely a wild card in any single scenario in which a game is taking place in Boston. And as Steve was kind of talking about, if you're someone with a Red Sox future and you're kind of looking at the teams that might scare you both in the American League and in the National League, there's a chance that after some housekeeping today, the Dodgers are no longer a threat in the National League. The Brewers with that crazy rotation are no longer a threat in the National League. And now you're left with a Giants team that, again, was incredible, the best team in baseball, but that a lot of us still just look at and go, how is this team winning 107 games? I don't understand it. And a Braves team that, power to them and power to Alex Anthopoulos for not giving up after Ronald Acuna Jr. got hurt. They went out and brought in some pieces like a Jorge Soler, like a Jock Peterson at the deadline to try and stop gap and fill that hole. But, being the best team in the National League East, not exactly an accomplishment. So I think this is all kind of breaking right. Now, obviously, the Astros are an incredible behemoth of a playoff team to have to get through. We have seen this time and time again for the past 5 seasons, but it's breaking in a very positive Red Sox direction, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Steve, are you fearful? So Steve admitted that he was surprised. He was pleasantly surprised that his prediction was wrong about the ALDS. He thought the Rays would advance, and the Red Sox, they did Steve a favor last night. Steve and Julian both liked the over on the run total, and that worked out for you, Steve. So nice work. How do you feel about this series? Say it is Red Sox-Astros. How do the Red Sox match up?
So the Red Sox struggled against this Astros team during the regular season. But, at the end of the day, you kind of toss those aside. This is a whole different situation. The problem is that the Red Sox got hot at the right time. Shout out to Colin McHugh and Michael Walker. That's basically where the Red Sox postseason turned around because of those two coming out of the bullpen. They ended up tagging both of those guys for 9 runs through 4 1/3 innings, and they never looked back after that. They very well could have lost that game last night too as well. And that's where the biggest issue is. That's where the biggest difference is going to come against this Astros team. That Red Sox bullpen is good. It's not great. The Houston Astros bullpen is good. It's not great. And if you have to put the 2 starting rotations next to each other and say, who's the better, who's in a better position here? It's by far the Astros. You have Nathan Eovaldi over the Red Sox, and then that's kind of it. You don't feel good about Chris Sale. Still not convinced that Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be, the guy that we saw last night, because quite frankly, that's just how inconsistent he's been. I was shocked at how he performed last night against the Rays, who have hit him hard in 2 prior starts at Fenway Park. Maybe Tanner Houck ends up starting a game because he's looked phenomenal for them. That's People are already throwing Chris Sale comparison. The right-handed Chris Sale comparison is already coming out about him. His slider is just absolutely nasty. And, maybe you have to end up starting Nick Pivetta. There's a lot of moving parts on both of these teams. But the Red Sox do have a little bit of an edge here, I think, because of the way that they're kind of heating up right now. Like, this is like what we saw with the Cardinals. Like, they just hit at the right time. And that's what got them into the playoffs. Now, granted, it was one and done, but that team peaked too early. They had to get in the position they are. The Red Sox might start peaking at the right time, which is where you need to peak right now. And when it comes to the playoffs, we've seen it many times. Sometimes all it takes is a couple of hot streaks to get going, and then you coast through the rest of the playoffs. We saw this in 2004 with Boston, who ended up, beating New York 4 games in a row and then swept the St. Louis Cardinals after that. If you get hot at the right time, that's all you need in the playoffs. And that might be happening right now with the Red Sox.
So at 4:00, I put in our show rundown today. The Sox, the favorite to win the ALCS at plus 120. The Astros in line next at plus 130. Of course, things have changed in that baseball game going on in Chicago as Luis Robert has left today's game against the Astros. It's 6-1. You look at the odds now. The Astros are at minus 160 and the Red Sox are still there at plus 120. So the Astros with a complete 180 as far as their chances.
I mean, that's a way to frame it, but really those odds were only reflecting that the Astros still had to beat the White Sox to get to the ALCS. I mean, I don't think there's any question that the Astros should be favored in this series against the Red Sox. They have home field advantage. And again, by whether you want to use like expected win-loss, run differential, whatever, they were by far the better team than the Red Sox for the entirety of 162 games during the regular season. The Astros are also the most complete team in baseball, I think, at least from an offensive perspective, because what they can do that so few teams can do is throw not only powerful right-handed bats time after time, but the balance in their lineup is incredible. I mean, between Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker, not to mention Michael Brantley, who just, hits 320, and we accept that. They might have 2 of the 10 best left-handed hitters in baseball in their lineup, and one of them hits 7th, because where else would he hit? Like, it really is crazy the amount of depth that they bring to the table. And I think today's game against, a pitcher who had been as dominant as Carlos Rodon had been throughout the season is a really good indication of the kind of obstacle that they present. I mean, Chris Sale, we've talked about him already as someone who has not looked good so far in these playoffs, was someone who looked a little shaky even in the regular season, despite the fact that, I mean, man, his schedule, I don't know if he got to like handpick the matchups coming back from Tommy John surgery, but aside from a couple games against the Rays, it was like, hey, do you like Baltimore, Chris Sale? Because you're going to face a whole lot of Baltimore. But he looked a little shaky during the regular season as well, and that's to be expected. So, but you look at what they just did against Carlos Rodon, a powerful left-handed pitcher, it does not matter because as Steve knows and talks about all the time, even their left-handed bats, Yordan Alvarez, fantastic hitter against left-handed pitching. Like, it doesn't matter what the splits are, quote unquote, because they are split proof. Like, the Astros are just an incredible team.
And I think
they got him out of the game.
Real quick, I just want to add one thing real quick. I think it's indicative of, just goes to show how bad, I don't say bad, but how untrustworthy Chris Sale has been, because they showed a shot of him warming up in the bullpen, and Twitter collectively was like, oh no, like they need to win right now before he gets in the game. Can you imagine thinking that when the Red Sox won the World Series a couple of years ago, he was the guy coming out of that bullpen to close out games because they didn't have a closer. Fast forward a couple of years later, he's warming up and we're all like, win now. Don't let him in.
Some would say those two things are very connected. Some would say that maybe his dominance in 2019 was the reason that he had to have Tommy John surgery and now is not longer the same pitcher.
You're on to something there, Garion, because it actually brings up a point that I wanted to address, and it's about the Red Sox specifically. Their bullpen. What's that?
We still talking about the Red Sox? It's crazy that I hate this team, right? Like, God, how
Hey, well, you know what, Garion? We can't control that the Red Sox are the only team that have punched their ticket to the next round. And it's also...
Hey, I'm not Steve. There's no reason...
Hey, Garion, what happened yesterday that caused the game not to happen? There was a game that got moved to today. I think there was weather, right? It was bad weather that moved the game.
Now we're trying to have an in-joke after you just yelled at me? I'm not being part of this. That was rude.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Anyways, there was a chance, of course, yesterday for one of those series to wrap up, including the Red Sox, as they did yesterday. How about this Red Sox bullpen, though, and this, because, Steve, I know you were shocked or borderline shocked about what Eduardo Rodriguez did yesterday. What are we making? Can the Red Sox continue the magic and continue to get magic from their bullpen in spite of their shaky starting pitching, with the exception of Nathan Eovaldi? Like, how do we feel about, can the bullpen carry them through this next round?
I think the way you're looking at this bullpen is not how you're going to look at that bullpen through the championship series. They were so desperate for bullpen arms that they were using their next day starters out of the bullpen. Nick Pivetta was supposed to pitch game 4. They had to use him out of the bullpen because they had nobody, because Eduardo Rodriguez gave them nothing, because Chris Sale gave them nothing. The way their bullpen shaped out was not the plan for the bullpen at all. And obviously, nothing is left on the table when it comes to the playoffs. But if you say that the Red Sox bullpen got them to where they are, you're not looking at the Red Sox bullpen. That's how untrustworthy they were. That's how bad that they've been, that they had to turn to starters and say, we can't trust anybody. We need Nick Pivetta, who is slated to go tomorrow at the time. You need to go out and pitch 4 innings. Hell, they had Martin Perez warming up. That's the last guy you want in a game at this point, okay? That's just how bad this bullpen has been. So when you're describing the bullpen, that's not the bullpen. That was desperation. So if you're asking if the bullpen is going to carry them, absolutely not. They better.
I guess. Okay. So I meant, Pivetta, right. Technically Pivetta came out of the bullpen, but he's a starter. Right. So I'm saying, can that model work for them in another round?
No, they can't do that. They can't be doing it. You can't rely on that, especially now that it's a 7-game series. You need your starters to go as deep as possible. You can't be using Nick Pivetta out of the bullpen in a 7-game series. So you either better sweep that series or you better get a lot of longevity out of your starters. Well, so if that's going to be an issue, that's going to be a problem.
And it just seems like they don't have, like what we're seeing today. Like we've got Charlie Morton pitching on 3 days rest. We've got Walker Buehler pitching on 3 days rest.
Yep.
It seems very clear they do not want to do that with Chris Sale. Like they even before he, blew up in game 2 against the Rays, there was an opportunity not to start him against the Yankees in the wildcard game, but at least put him on the roster as someone who could possibly come in a bullpen role. And they chose not to do that. So right now, all the signs point to Chris Sale can only pitch on a full 4 days rest. Maybe they feel differently about Nathan Eovaldi, but to Steve's point, if you're in a 7-game series and right now your 2 of your 3 most reliable relievers are guys who would be in line to start game 3 and game 4, it's just not really a sustainable model. I would say if you play that Rays series 100 times and you're only getting, 3 combined innings from Chris Sale and Eduardo Rodriguez, I mean, they probably lose that series 85 of the 100 times. It really is incredible the amount, but this goes back to their offensive production. That's really, that is something they hold over most teams, is their ability to score runs. But the Astros, by most advanced metrics, are the best offensive team in baseball. So it does get a little hairy when you look at it in that way. And that's why, again, I say that justifiably the Astros are favored in this series.
Okay. So you both like the Astros. Is that your pick?
I'm not saying I like the Astros. Like, don't put words in my mouth. I'm just saying that, like, the Astros have the bullpen advantage in this one. I think these teams are pretty even at the end of the day. Like Garion says that the Astros are probably the best built offense from top to bottom. I would agree with that. But then you're also getting stupid production out of guys like Kike Hernandez, who would not even, maybe even crack the starting lineup for the Astros. So it's, the Red Sox are coming in hot. That's what it comes. And then after this, please stop talking about them. But after this, like, you're getting somebody who is hitting way above his level, and Kike Hernandez that, kind of messes with everything. So I need to kind of let this marinate a little bit. Maybe we can talk about this on Friday, but I mean, for the love of God, like, Gary's been through enough. Like, stop talking about this team. Take off your homer hat. Like, I'm in Boston. I'm not a big homer. Like, I'll leave it to you as it is. Stop being a homer.
Hey, I'm just going off of the rundown here. So let's move. Let's backtrack a bit. Let's go back to last week when we were all together. So the White Sox thing, Steve, ain't looking great. White Sox Brewers World Series matchup. Garion, though, your Brewers, they're down 2-1. Of course, they've got to win tonight against the Braves on the road to extend that series to a Game 5. How do you feel about the Brew Crew in this spot today, and can they move on? Just talking about your future.
I mean, they really would have loved if Atlanta took a more conservative route with Charlie Morton and started, in this game. I mean, the fact that Morton is pitching in this contest is troublesome, to say the least. Although I will say Eric Lauer doesn't really get the headlines because, he's not one of their big three. He's not Brandon Woodruff. He's not an all-star in any sense of the word. However, he really did change his just his arsenal and his rates on how he uses his pitches. And his last 15 starts, where he was really just button mashing his breaking ball, had an ERA below 2.3. So again, this is the crux of the Brewers. They pitch really, really well. And I think if you came into this series and said, hey, the Brewers are going to hold the Braves to 3 runs or fewer in the first 3 games of this series, as someone with a Brewers future, I would have been like, all right, that seems pretty reasonable. Like, I can't complain about that. But they've been shut out the last 2 nights. They traded for Eduardo Rodriguez. That was kind of their big offensive acquisition at the deadline. And he's not even playing above Luis Urias right now. Like, they just don't have the bats. The fact that Christian Yelich has turned into, like, I don't know, Gerard Dyson in the past 6 months. Like, what happened to Christian Yelich? It's just really strange. There's no offensive production on this team. And that was going to be their Achilles heel the whole time. Mm-hmm. Again, it was a bet I made at the All-Star break. I think there was pretty good value at the time, but yeah, it's been very disappointing to say the least.
Just to update folks, bottom 7 right now in Chicago. White Sox trail the Astros 6-1. There are 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th, and it's bottom 1 in Atlanta between the Braves and the Brewers. There is a game tonight that we can preview from a sportsbook side and a daily fantasy side. There is a showdown available on DraftKings. Giants and Dodgers. Anthony DeSclafani taking on Walker Buehler tonight. It's DeSclafani's first appearance of the postseason. Walker Buehler pitched in Game 1. He allowed a home run early in the ball game in Game 1 of that contest. He didn't get much run support. Shall we talk some showdown? How do we want to attack this showdown tonight? Look at all of those Dodgers. You have to get down to Chris Bryant to find the first Giants hitter, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a tough matchup to break down, I think, because, DeSclafani's been great all throughout the year, but the one team that's really given him a lot of issues is the Dodgers. So for somebody that's been as good as he is, I mean, you look at his overall numbers, they look great, but then look at these numbers here. 6 games against the Dodgers, 22 runs allowed on 33 hits through 27 innings. They have crushed him this season. So now in this, pivotal game, this would be a spot to be targeting a lot of the Dodgers bats. And you look at what DeSclafani has done in the second half. Right-handed hitters have really kind of give him issues. He has a 1.7 home run over 9 during the second half of the season against righties. And you look at the Dodgers lineup here that you can get out. I mean, there's a lot of guys in there that you can do. And all throughout his career as well, DeSclafani has had a lot of trouble with lefties as well. Like, that's been one of the issues really until this season that you had against him, because that lefties were always giving him issues. So I know they have a couple in there tonight, like Corey Seager, Gavin Lux is in the lineup too as well. So there's a lot of Dodgers bats to like in this game. And then if Walker Buehler can just do what he did against this team already, this has also been a team that's given him some issues. So I'm not really high on either pitcher in this game, especially a Walker Buehler on short rest. Not crazy about that. So I really think this is a game where I'm steering away from the pitching and just kind of load up on as many bats as I can.
Okay. And of course, you're going to have to play, Steve, you're going to have to play some Giants here. Where are you finding value in the Giants? Because, I mean, like I said, look at all those Dodgers there at the top of that board.
Yeah, so I don't think we have the Giants lineup out as of yet. So really it's kind of hard to judge who the value is on this slate. Okay. But, it's kind of one of those things that if you're not paying for pitching, the hitters become a lot more affordable, because those obviously are the 2 most expensive guys, over 10,600 for both of them equally. But a lot of the starters here are going to be in this 9 to 8 to 7K range. So if you're not taking the pitchers like I am, value isn't as necessary as if you were trying to get at least one of those pitchers in the lineup tonight.
Okay, very good. Garion, do you feel Walker Buehler is in a spot tonight to bounce back?
I mean, it is a little tough to trust someone who's never actually worked on short rest before, but I think with the Dodgers backs up against the wall,
he's never worked on short rest before.
I don't believe he's ever started a game on 3 days rest. So
you're the host. Why don't you look it up?
I will. I'm thinking back to when the Dodgers played. He didn't come off short rest against the Rays last year.
I don't believe so.
Okay, no, I take your word.
Something I think I read this morning. I might be wrong, but
no, you're fine. Blame me. I'm just throwing it out there as a curious listener.
Even if he has pitched on short rest, just any pitcher on short rest, something he has not done in 2021, that's concerning. And we've also seen even today, no matter how good you are as a starting pitcher, just how quickly the hook has come out for some of these amazing pitchers. Like we saw Dave Roberts do this in the wild card game with Max Scherzer, taking him out before he had gotten through 5 innings. Today, in a game, the Astros were leading 5-1. Now, maybe this speaks to Dusty Baker thinking they had the game won and thinking, hey, if I take Lance McCullers out now, he can start game 2 of the series against the Red Sox. But McCullers gets removed with, I believe, 68 pitches or something along those lines after 4 innings. Like the hooks are quicker now than they have ever been. So knowing that already and then factoring in the short rest, it's hard to captain, let alone put someone at utility where they may only pitch 4 innings tonight, because the Dodgers do have a very deep bullpen. It's one of the strengths of the team. And we saw that play out in the wild card game specifically. It's also a slate where the guys who you would perceive as possible values, and you mentioned it, Glash, you basically have to cycle through the entire Dodgers lineup before you get to a single Giants player. So the Giants are really where the value is, quote unquote. But the guys who you might lean towards, the public will probably end up going with, like Lamont Wade, who is $6,200, or I believe $6,000. Someone like Tommy La Stella, who's very likely going to bat leadoff in this game for the Giants. However, we've seen, much like the Tampa Bay Rays, the Giants are a team designed to exploit platoon advantages. So as soon as La Stella is faced with a left-handed reliever, he will be removed from this game. We've seen it happen in game 1 and game 3. He only had 2 plate appearances in both those games. So while you're thinking, oh, this is amazing, I'm getting a leadoff hitter in my lineup for $5,800, incredible, it doesn't matter if he's hitting leadoff. He's only going to hit twice. It's basically like hitting 9th anyway. So the obvious value spots aren't really that obvious. And I think you might have to double dip on the Dodgers if you truly want value, because as Steve mentioned, the big worry with someone like Anthony DeSclafani, not only has he been roughed up by the Dodgers this season, a 7.33 ERA across 6 starts, the left-handed bats historically have given him the most issue, 1.6 home runs per 9 to left-handed bats for his career. So Gavin Lux hitting 6th, Cody Bellinger hitting 7th. Yeah, the numbers might not say in 2021 that they've been amazing hitters in any regard, but they're left-handed and they're cheap. And that might be enough to actually be viable on this slate.
All right, I double-checked it. Short rest, it's happened. It has not happened, excuse me. This is first time. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 days rest is the shortest that he's done. He's done that 25 times. He did pitch in relief on 3 days rest twice in 2017, only 2 innings. So that's the closest that he's come.
Okay, first start on short rest. There we go.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, Steve, for also looking into that as well.
Great host.
Appreciate that. All right, so looking at some of the splits, Julian Edlow put up some splits earlier in the afternoon. I didn't see splits anywhere else. The public loves the under, Steve. It's 8. The total runs is 8. The under is what the public is into. 62% of the handle on the Giants run line, but 57% of the bets are on the Dodgers at -1.5. K-props were down earlier on Walker Buehler. You can get plus money for over innings or strikeouts at 5.5, and hits allowed over 3.5 is +100.
Well, here's the thing about the Giants run line. When they are underdogs, they are 35-5 on the run line this season. Absolutely absurd. But with that said, DeSclafani has been absolutely annihilated by this team. So I don't think this is going to be a close game. Like this would not be a scenario that I would be wanting to take the Giants on the run line, despite them being underdogs and how well they've performed. Again, I don't like either pitcher in this spot. So the under being the heavy favorite is a little worrisome. Obviously you're more than free to fade the public. More often than not, that's usually the play to actually make, is to fade the public. So it's a very well set game at 8. Obviously that's a tough number. You'd obviously like to get that half if you can, but I would side with the over in this one just because I don't think DeSclafani is going to give you much of anything, and we've never seen Walker Buehler in this type of situation. So it's a lot of variables that would point to the over rather than the under.
Okay. And then any interest in the props? DeSclafani does have a 3.5 total for strikeouts. Over is at -140, and hits allowed is at -130. Just looking at some pitcher props. So if you don't like both pitchers, you might want to be considering some overs here on the hits, at least.
If I don't like a pitcher, I'm certainly not going to take the over on his strikeouts. That just doesn't, make a lot of sense. Hits allowed over 3.5. Like that feels criminal. Like how low that is.
I guess the thinking is as
he comes out early,
he gets into trouble.
Yeah.
Going to have that bullpen up.
Yep.
So maybe it's a situation where, he walks a couple batters, gives up a key hit, and he's out of there before he can give up 4 hits. But generally speaking, I agree with Steve. It's a low number for someone who, if he even pitches 4 innings, he should probably give up 4 hits.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Interesting. How do you feel about, are we reminded, and I know I brought this up, and Gary, and I promise I'm not trying to make this about the Red Sox. I know we were just talking about it.
Don't make it about the Red Sox.
No, I'm using them as an example because we've seen, actually, I won't use it. I won't make it about the Red Sox.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
Please.
I'll go back.
Yeah, go ahead. I need to hear it now. I need to hear it now.
I'll go back to the wild card game. Okay. I'll go back to the wild card game. Dodgers, Cardinals. You got 2 really strong arms on the mound, we think, in Wainwright versus Scherzer. We're on here last Tuesday. Hammer that over on the 7.5 strikeouts. And what do you know? Like in a do or die scenario, which we are painting tonight here for the Dodgers, down 2-1. I guess makes sense why Walker Buehler's numbers at just 5.5 and why you consider an under. I guess my overall point is, and this is also a point for the showdown, stay away from the starting pitching altogether. Like, I think we're going to end up, this might be readdressed when we're in a situation in the LCS, AL, NL, when a team is down 3-2 or down 3-1, and they are the team trying to come back. Everyone's on a short leash. I think those are some things I've forgotten about. Does that make sense to keep those things in mind?
Again, it's just longevity. It's how long can we actually expect both of these pitchers to work tonight? And, generally that wouldn't be a question with someone like Walker Buehler, but, the Dodgers' backs are against the wall. And this is the point, I'll bring it back to the Red Sox. The point we were making about the Red Sox and their bullpen management so far in these playoffs is, yes, there doesn't seem like there's such a massive difference between a 5-game series and a 7-game series. It's only 2 more games. But when you're down 1-0 in a 5-game series, it already feels like, oh man, we have to win this next game. It's a little different in a 7-game series. It's a longer dance, and the pitchers tend to just get longer leashes. So I think your perception of how deep and how much of a floor starting pitchers represent has to change between the division series and the championship series.
I gotta respond to this. I feel like he was personally attacking me because Julian Edlow and I were on the over of 7.5 strikeouts for Max Scherzer. Let me tell you something here.
So was Garion.
I was also on that. Yeah.
Okay.
It was the one bet I lost.
See, again, that's not make this
bring
about
up the
you.
2 bets I won, Glash. Just bring up the one bet.
Right. Yeah. Bring up the losers. Okay. The guy who wanted the under on last night's Red Sox game. Give me a break. 2 bullpen games. Dope. Anyways, here's the thing. You look at that Cardinals team against Max Scherzer. Scherzer had a 14.1 K9 against that team. So you're telling me he needs to go over 8 strikeouts against a team that he not just went over with before in prior matchups, sailed past that number. And I know coming into that game that Scherzer was a little shaky coming into it, but I was willing to toss that away. This is a big game for Max Scherzer. He's usually shown up in these situations. So that's why we were on the over on that one. That's why.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to bring up the fact that when in a do or die, we're reminded in the postseason that a manager might have a shorter leash, and that's something I didn't think about going into that game last Tuesday.
Sure.
Okay.
That's all. I don't blame. I mean, Steve, I listened to you. I threw something in on it too. I was interested in it. So.
Oh, so now it's my fault you lost money.
Well, yeah, we can. That's a good take as well. What do we say? We can spend a couple minutes on the NFL. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, what the hell ever.
Okay. How about Thursday night? Just as a jumping off point, because it is approaching. It's 2 days away. We have the Bucks and the Eagles. Buccaneers are 4-1. Eagles are 2-3. Bucks are 6.5-point favorites. All the money coming in is on Tampa. No one's given Philly a chance. Do we use last night as a reminder, and back to Steve's point of fading the public, do we have to give Philadelphia some consideration here?
I've been on Philly multiple times this season. I was all over them last week against the Panthers, and that worked out mighty fine. Here's the problem, though. The Buccaneers are going to be one of the most popular teaser pieces for this week, because you tease them down to half a point. Basically, you just need them to win against the Phillies. The Phillies. I'm still doing both sports. You need them to win against the Eagles. The problem is, and I'm a little worried about this, is the health of Tom Brady and that thumb. I heard it was very heavily taped today. He's not going to miss the game because he's, stubborn as all hell.
Do you have sources?
He's going to play. What?
Where'd you hear that?
Hear what?
Well, you said you heard it. That implies that you have sources.
Yeah, it's called twitter.com. That is, so his thumb was heavily taped up. He's still going to play, but don't love that. Don't love that at all. And quite frankly, we want to talk about how bad the Eagles secondary is. You can absolutely say that about the Buccaneers as well. So when you get into those situations where now you're just, both teams are going up and down the field, obviously when you put these two offenses, next to each other, the Buccaneers have a massive advantage here. But if we're talking about a quarterback who's out of his mind and could be playing at, less than 100%, that does, worry me a little bit. So on paper, yes, the Buccaneers should absolutely win this game. But the Brady element's an interesting wrinkle and something we have to watch for over the next day and a half.
So where are you leaning, Steve, on the total?
Same thing. This should sail past the over if we're being quite honest, because again, both teams should go up and down the field with ease.
Right.
But if we're not going to get that from the Bucs side, if, maybe Brady's at less than 100%, or maybe they just lean on the run more, then that would tend you to go on the under, because if they're running the ball a lot more and the Bucs do it at one of the lowest rates in the league, but if they do that more in this game, then that changes everything. Like that, this game could end up going way under if that's the choice. So it's an interesting wrinkle. It's something that, it's unfortunate because I'd love to use the Bucs as a teaser piece, because getting them down to, just needing them to win and pairing them with some other teams, that's very enticing. But this news is interesting.
I would say the one thing that's kind of interesting, and, Brady's thumb would be a huge factor in this game hitting the over. But, I got to give credit to former DK Live employee, Anthony Amico. Go check him out on Twitter. Got some great football takes as always. But he made a joke last week that was, pretty poignant, which is the Bucs might actually be a better defense if they started being a little worse against the run, because they're so good stopping the run. And we've seen time and time again, teams come into the week with game plans where they basically just scrap the running game entirely. And we've actually seen the Eagles do this not against the Bucs. I mean, there's a lot of buzz the last couple of weeks about how Miles Sanders is basically in witness protection right now. Like they just don't want to run the football. I mean, we can talk about balance and game script and et cetera, but the fact of the matter is you're more likely to score more points. You have a higher implied yardage total per play when you are passing the football. Right. And if we just know that the Eagles are going to be passing 70 to 80% of their downs in this contest, and we just pencil in the Bucs for their usual, 3 to 4 touchdowns and maybe get a little bit more than that, I do think there's a pretty good chance this game goes over. I just think the Bucs in general invite overs because they really do force teams into better offensive situations. They force conservative play callers to actually embrace the pass. And in general, that is better for the over.
Bucs to the over are 4-1 through 5 games this year. And just to follow up on Steve's point about Brady's thumb, Brady, I guess today said he calls it a bruise. He says it's sore, but he's playing.
Who are your sources?
This is from John Clark, Steve. He is a reporter in Philadelphia for NBC Sports Philly.
I don't trust him.
Two first names.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions and comments. Do you guys mind if we jump into the main slate? There's a point here about the Ravens defense this Sunday. They're only $2,300 this week. I just looked at the salary. They're hosting the Chargers.
Yep.
That was actually something else we could talk about briefly too before we go. But when you're looking at games, and of course you look at those totals, that's a nice way of segue. You see Chiefs football team 55.5, Chargers, also Ravens up over 50 points. And then of course Arizona and Cleveland a high total. Are those some games as we look on the DFS side that you're looking to target from a stacking standpoint?
I mean, just to answer the question, like I would have almost no interest in the Ravens defense. I mean, they were going up against one of the worst offensive lines in the Colts right now, who are absolutely ravaged by injury, ravaged by poor play, and they were barely getting any pressure on Carson Wentz, like on two bad ankles, nonetheless. So if you can't get pressure on Carson Wentz, you're probably not going to get a lot of pressure on Justin Herbert, who has a very strong offensive line in front of him. So the Ravens is not a defense that I'd be interested in at all. Talking about that Chiefs Washington football team game, the over under in that game is 55.5. That should go way over, honestly. You're talking about there are 4 teams in the NFL right now that have allowed at least an average of 30 points per game. We have team number 1 and team number 2 facing each other. That's the Chiefs and the Washington football team. The Chiefs have allowed an average of 32.3 points through the first 5 weeks of the season. The Washington football team, 30. Now you have Mahomes coming off a loss going against this secondary, and Tyler Heineke, who quite frankly has been low-key pretty damn good. 63% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns thrown. That's even without throwing one last week against the Saints. So these two teams are going to go up and down the field constantly. So 55.5, huge total. Both teams realistically could put up 30 plus points in this game. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire officially out. So he's on the IR. So they really don't have anybody to run the ball in the Chiefs. Not that they really had anybody to begin with, because CEH has been nothing but a massive disappointment. But now you take him out of the mix and you have a Washington football team that is more than willing to throw the ball, and you can throw this ball against the Chiefs. That's going to go over, baby.
His name's Taylor Heineke.
What did I say?
Tyler.
Whatever.
All right.
He's not offended. Heineke.
Garion, is there a game you're targeting DFS Sportsbook this week? Something you feel good about right now?
Well, I think, like Steve was saying, this matchup between Washington and Kansas City, it's just so prime to be a high-scoring game. So far this season, every team that has played the Chiefs have exceeded their implied team total. So you go into it assuming that Washington is just going to be able to score. And, you know, aside from Antonio Gibson, I would say is moderately priced. Terry McLaurin is justifiably priced above 7K. But I mean, this is Ricky Seals-Jones chalk week. It's going to be a really strange week, but you know, with Logan Thomas on IR, you know, Seals-Jones is coming off an 8-target game his last time out, and there's just going to be points scored in this game. So when you're talking about an asset that's like $3,000, and maybe you start sorting through some like wide receiver 2s for Washington football team as well. Like, does Curtis Samuel play in this contest? If he does, do you trust him at a salary that's just above the minimum? I just think there's a lot of ways to be able to save money with this Washington team. And it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel here. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of people trying to find value with Washington, but it does seem like it's a pretty good formula, at least as we sit here on Tuesday.
Ricky Seals-Jones, 9 points at 2,500 last week. It was nice. He was in a lineup.
He played 98% of the snaps, had 3 targets in the red zone. He's going to be just fine if he's going to continue on that trend.
Yeah, $3,000 this week. He was a nice little play. He was in the 4th or 5th place lineup, I think, in the Millie Maker from over the weekend. So good for Ricky.
That's a really weird thing to know, but thank you.
It's because I was with Jeff yesterday and we were doing a show reacting to Sunday, and then
I don't need the explanation. Just weird thing to know.
I mean, you do though, because that's why I know that. Okay.
Let's talk about the Red Sox.
I'd be kind of impressed if you just knew it and didn't have a reason. Wow. Flash.
Anyway, last one really quick, because we got to get going. There was a question in the Twitch chat. Steve, this is for you, I guess. You got a same game parlay play tonight on the DK Sportsbook for any of the baseball?
When you put me on the spot, no.
Okay, fine. That's all right.
Here, I'll say this quickly. I do like Corey Seager over 1.5 total bases in that game. He's -105.
Bingo.
Seager's had success against DeSclafani throughout his career, specifically this season. And as we talked about, the big weakness with DeSclafani is his ability to pitch to left-handed batters. Seager, easily the best left-handed batter on the Dodgers roster.
Yeah, you want to do something real quick? Dodgers and then over 8.5 plus 235. There's your same game parlay, real quick.
Good deal. You're the man. You're a likable guy. You know that? Nice job.
Sarah say that?
Okay. That's going to do it for us today here on the Slate. Thanks to Steve and Garion for their insights on the baseball and also the NFL Week 6 starting up Thursday. Just a quick update before we go. Top 8 in Chicago at 7-1. Houston in front, 2 out, top 8, and no score through an inning and a half at Atlanta between the Braves and the Brewers. Best of luck with your Dodgers and Giants showdown lineups or any betting picks. These two were fantastic as usual. Thanks to Eamon and Tom behind the scenes. Brendan Glasheen for Steve Buchanan, Gary, and Thorne. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, the Sweat is at 11 a.m. weekdays here at DraftKings, Twitter, YouTube, also on Twitch. And then the Slate tomorrow at 5 o'clock, you'll get Emerson, Reed, and Jeff breaking down all things in the NFL. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.